So welcome to your second ADD session, Introduction to AutoCAD. So as far as I'm aware, everyone who is in person never really used or opened AutoCAD before, so it's going to be introductory session, which is going to be covering the basics and everything from the beginning to end, how to import the drawing, how to start a new drawing, and how to export it and prepare it for potential future use. So straight away, the most important thing that we start with is that AutoCAD is a part of a really, really big family called Autodesk. Autodesk has 100 different software, different packages for different purposes. So it has AutoCAD, it has 3ds Max, it has Revit, it has Maya. Some of those you might have already heard before, some of those you have no idea what's happening and what's going on and what's there for. It's absolutely fine. Trust me, not a single person knows every single one of those. So you might be able to touch up on some of them in your studies. Today we're going to be covering specifically AutoCAD, and we're going to be doing a 2D, simple vanilla AutoCAD, two-dimensional AutoCAD. The good thing about AutoCAD is available for both Windows and Mac. All the tools and commands are going to be the same. It's just location and interface of the software itself might be slightly different. But again, if you type the command on Windows and Mac, both of them are going to be available. And the good thing as well about Autodesk is that as a student, you all have access for free for any of the Autodesk packages, including AutoCAD as well. So you can download it on your personal device just using your student credential, so your student email address and your password through the Autodesk website. So straight away, moving into AutoCAD. So you're working on Windows machines, so the interface is going to be Windows interface. As far as I'm aware, you have AutoCAD 2025 model, which is the newest so far. Can we please start opening AutoCAD? Also, you're more than welcome to join the Teams call, because again, this session is at the same time in person and on Teams, so you can open the Teams call and have it on your second screen. Some students prefer to use it, so it's closer to you. So for example, on the left you have your Teams call, and with my screen shared, and on the right you have the software itself. So you might prefer it this way. To find the link where AutoCAD's session is getting recorded to you and getting published into, you go to My Areas on Moodle, and find ADD page, MSA Architectural Digital Design. So go to MMU Moodle. In My Areas, find MSA Architectural Digital Design. We're going to go to weekly workshops. We're specifically looking for workshop number 2, AutoCAD. And in there, you're going to have a link for MSA Teams. So you're more than welcome to join this online as well as in person. While everyone loading those pages up, I'm going to start with just a plain AutoCAD interface. So AutoCAD on Windows, especially the newer models, always going to look roughly the same when it opens up. You might have multiple projects appearing on your front screen. That's just to give you an easy access to your previous files that you've already been working with. So imagine yesterday you've been working on a floor plan or master plan. You can easily find it here, just open the recent files. As standard, you have an open option or just create a new file. You also have some learning resources in here as well. So if you click on learning, you can have on your screen 5-minute videos about how to start with AutoCAD. It's just a good starting point, good basis. You also have your online resources on the bottom left corner in here, where you can ask questions on Autodesk forums, ask for online help, and etc. The first thing that you need to remember straight away is every time you open AutoCAD, you're going to be opening a template, because you need to make sure that the software knows which units you're going to be working in. So for example, are you going to be working in a metric system? Is all the measurements that you're going to be typing are in millimeters, meters, or are you trying to work in inches, feet, and so on and so on? So the first thing first, we always need to make sure that we are working in a metric system, because we are in the UK, metric system. So for that, where you have new option here, you have a drop-down menu, and there is Browse Templates. So we're straight away and opening a template that's going to be in metric system. This just to make sure that you don't draw your floor plan, type in all the measurements, and by the end find out that all this time you were working in inches. So Browse Templates, and the one that we are looking for is called AutoCAD ISO. Write that down. That's going to be your first template that you're going to be using, and probably the most common one. So AutoCAD ISO is going to be your AutoCAD template. So every single time you open AutoCAD, make sure that you open the template first to ensure that we are working in metric system. I'm just going to leave it on the screen for a second. When you found it, just click Open and start loading the AutoCAD. So AutoCAD ISO is our main template, so we're going to click Open. And you should have something very similar to what I have right now on my screen opening up. This is our main window for AutoCAD. Specifically, again, Windows AutoCAD. AutoCAD on Mac is going to look slightly different. So just quickly, let's go through the interface itself, just to get the idea where things are located. So you have the main drawing area, which takes the biggest part of your screen. With your mouse, the wheel on your mouse, you can scroll and zoom in and out of this space. This is infinite canvas. You can draw to one-to-one scale as big as you want. If you want, you can draw the whole city with it. You don't have any limitations to it. You can also see that it has a coordinate system. So you can see that on the bottom you have X and Y coordinate systems, that we know that we're working in 2D. On the top part of our screen, where you can see all your tools appearing in here, this is something we call the ribbon. So here you're going to have most of your tools, most of your annotations, all the settings that you can find and enable in AutoCAD. They're all going to be in a ribbon on the top part of the screen in here. The ribbon itself is divided into tabs, especially if you're looking into the Home section in here. You can see that we have a Draw tab, Modify, Annotation, Layers, etc., etc. You can flick through those as well. You have Home, where all your main tools are. You have Insert commands, where you can insert and bring the external files into AutoCAD. You have Annotate options, so that's a section where you're going to start adding your notes or dimensions. You're going to be able to modify those annotations. You have View. This is where you're going to be able to modify your viewport itself, your drawing area. Manage. This section will be able to help you to manage your whole experience in AutoCAD. Output is how you export the files as PDFs or any other formats, or you print them or you plot them into external directions. And you also have extra adds-on added in the end of your ribbon. Again, we're not going to go as far as looking into every single one today. We only have a limited amount of time at the end of the day. So the main part, ribbon on the top, drawing area in the middle. Right in the middle part here on the bottom, you have a command line. And this is a very important part in AutoCAD. Every single command, every single tool that you're going to be using is going to appear in your command line. It's going to give you all the prompts in there, all the instructions, and also going to give you a history of all the tools that you've been using. So make sure that you keep an eye on this command bar just in here. So we have also a quick access toolbar in here. This is where you can save, you can open new files, you can plot things, you can modify it, you can add extra tools in there if you need to. On the bottom left corner, you have our different viewports. So we have our model viewport, and we also have a couple of layouts. Try to press on those two layouts that we have as standard. So layouts, you can create as many as you want, and those, as we call it, a virtual paper. So in comparison to the model viewport, the dark blue one, which is infinite canvas, layouts are constrained to the physical paper sizes. So what we're going to be doing here, we're going to be exporting our files from layouts. So in here, you're going to be able to set up how big is your page is going to be and what the scale you want to print to. So for example, in here, you're going to be able to stop, okay, I know that I need to print my floor plan at 1:100 on A3 page size, which means that on the model viewport, you model your building in 1:1 scale, you draw it in 1:1, and when you go to layout 1, that's where you set up page size, and you specify this is going to be scale 1:100, and it's going to zoom in to your floor plan. Make sense? You can create as many layouts as you want. It's a good practice to rename them as well. So you can say that this layout number 1 is going to be A2 page size, layout 3 is going to be A3 page size, and the scale that you're going to be printing to. Again, we're going to look into layouts by the end of the session. Let's go back to the model viewport. So the only things that are only left, we have here left, we have our status bar, which is on the bottom right corner, in here. These are your most drawing tools. So these are going to help you draw. So just as an example, if you want to draw specifically at 90 degrees, or if you want to snap to a specific object, all those tools are going to be in here. Sometimes as well, students manage to close ribbon or minimize ribbon, and suddenly all the tools are missing. Half of our tutorials is request students coming to us and say, I don't have all my tools, how do I bring it back? If you minimize your AutoCAD screen, you can see this little tiny button in here. And if you try to flick through them, it's going to change the view of your ribbon. So if something like that happens, if your ribbon suddenly disappears, don't panic. Just go to this tiny little button and flick through the different workspace options. Again, this is a personal preference. How do you prefer to work? Some people prefer to have a bigger drawing space and less visible tools. In the beginning, I would recommend keep your ribbon on so you have all your tools visibly in front of you. The good thing about AutoCAD is that there are no right or wrong way to use this. So you can either start typing commands by typing, for example, line, or you can find the same command on the ribbon. You can go to the command bar and start typing the same command. So for example, I can start typing command join, and it's going to give me all the commands that potentially I can use. It's completely up to you how do you prefer to use it. going to quickly set up our layout, our interface. What I personally recommend everyone is to also have one extra window always set up on your page. And this window is called Properties. So don't need to click anywhere, just simply start typing word properties. And you can see that even when you start typing the first letter of a command, it's giving you options for all the commands that starts with the same letter. So the one that you want to use is properties. And it's going to bring this new floaty window. Any windows that you have in AutoCAD, you can snap to any part of the screen as you want. I personally prefer to snap it in here, in the left. So if you bring it closer to one of the edges, it will start trying to snap to the edge of a page. So if you want to move it, you have a dark part of the floating window on the left. Just try to move it through that. And you can see that if you hover over different parts of a screen, it's going to try to snap to them. The more you use your AutoCAD, you might be able to, want to set up your own interfaces. You might want to bring new windows, and you might want to snap them to different parts of the screen. There is a way to save this interface, this workspace, so you don't need to open it and set it up every single time. So when we place properties where we need to, if you want to bring any other windows, you're more than welcome to use. You're always going to be able to close them if you need to. But when you're happy with your interface, with your workspace, you can go to the status bar on the bottom right corner, and there is little gear in here. If you click on the gear and an arrow pointing downwards, it gives you different workspace options. And one of them is Save Current As. It just means that whatever you've set up, you can save that this is my preferred workspace, this is my preferred layout. I can save it, I can load it, and I can always use the same one, and don't spend 5 minutes every single time I start a new project by moving boxes around. So click Save Current As, give it a name, and just click Save. And now when I go back to the same settings, the same gear tool, you can see that the new interface, the workspace that you have created has now been saved in here. You can always load it up from here. Okay, let's actually try to draw something. We're going to be starting from the Home tab on our ribbon, and we're going to start with our drawing tools. It's actually very logical the way the ribbon is constructed. We have first we need to draw something. After that we might need to modify what we have drawn. So after that we need to annotate it. We might want to move it to different layers, etc., etc. So it's almost step-by-step guide how you do it. So we're going to start with a draw tab in here. If you can see next to every single word there is a little arrow pointing down, which means that you can actually make this tab slightly larger and show the hidden tools. They're just a little bit less commonly used, but they're still in there. Another thing good to mention as well about AutoCAD, if you just hover over any tool, any command, don't click it, just hover over it. It gives you a description what does this command do, and also tells you that if you press F1, it's going to bring you to the website of this website, and it's going to give you more description about this current tool. We're going to start with a simple line tool. So click on line or just type line. And straight away we're going to be looking in our command line, because this is going to give us all the instructions that we need to follow to actually use the tool. So it's asking us to specify a first point. So right now we're not going to give any specific measurements, we're just going to be estimating placing points in space. And as simple as I'm going to click once to start a line, click again to finish a line. And until the moment I want to stop this command, I can continue clicking and creating more and more lines. To finish a command in AutoCAD, you can either press Enter, Escape, or Space. So again, before I press either Escape, Space, or Enter, AutoCAD will allow me to continually drawing more lines on my model viewport. If I want to start drawing with a little bit more precision, so for example, if I know how long the length of the lines that I want to do, if I go back to my line tool, start it anywhere on my canvas, and you can see that above the line, I have a rectangle appearing with weird numbers that keep changing. This is actually the length of your line. So you can just type a number to specify the length. It's as simple as that. So I started my line by just clicking somewhere on the screen, and I'm going to type, let's say 5,000. And if I zoom close enough, I can see that now I have a segment, a line, that's actually going to be 5,000 millimeters. It might be very small because you might be zoomed out too much. So again, start with the line tool, click anywhere on your canvas, and just type the number for the length of the line that you want to produce. So I just typed 6,500, which is 6.5 meters, or 6,500 millimeters. Press enter again to finish the tool that commands that I'm using. And just to quickly check, this is 6,500 millimeters, or 6.5 meters long. Another thing as well to notice that when I start typing the length for the curves that I'm using, for the lines that I'm using, it's almost is getting defined, the angle of the line is getting defined where my cursor is. So the line is following this cursor. If I want it to be horizontal or vertical, you can either put your cursor next to it, so for example to the right, and you can see that my line is almost want to snap to 90 degree. If I do the same thing to the vertical, you can see that line is trying to snap to a 90 degree vertical. You can also click and hold shift while you're doing the curve, while you're doing this line. If you click and hold shift, your line is always going to snap to 90 degrees, either 90 degrees up, to the right, down, or left. If you don't want to constantly hold shift and you're drawing a simple floor plan that has pretty straight walls, there is a really useful command, and it appears in the status bar. It's one just in here. And if I hover over it, it says restrict my cursor orthogonally. It's in here. This will mean that any lines that I draw, they will be restricted to 90 degrees. And I don't need to hold shift. This is very useful, again, if you're drawing a technical drawing and you have a very straight walls on your floor plan. So this tool, this command is called ortho. And this is something good to remember because a lot of different packages, different software has a similar commands or even identical commands. They mean the same thing. So if you know what ortho means in AutoCAD, you will be able to use it in other packages in other software as well. So you're restraining your lines or your objects to be drawn at specific angles. In our current situation, it's 90 degrees. I'm going to turn it off to give me a little bit more freedom in my drawing. And the next tool that I'm going to be trying is polyline. Does anyone have ideas what the difference between line and polyline? Or what polyline is?
Can you like create curves with polyline?
Yeah, you can create curves. Anything else? Anyone can tell me what the polyline is and what the difference between line and polyline? It's actually very simple. Poly just means many. So the idea is that we've just been using lines, and if I try to select this object, every single part of it is going to be individual object. So even though we were drawing it line by line, they're not connected between each other. They're separate lines. If I do the same thing with a polyline, and I try to select this object, you can see that it's all connected into one polyline. Lines can be transformed to polylines, and polylines can be transformed to lines. So object that we've drawn with lines, I can just click and drag the selection tool, start typing join, and we'll join all the lines in between each other. So again, right now they're separate objects. I can select them at the same time, so just click over it and drag the selection tool, just like this. And I'm going to type join. And this will join all those separate lines into a single polyline. And if I have a polyline, opposite of a join command is going to be explode. I can explode this polyline into individual lines. Any questions so far? Let's play a little bit more with the polyline tool. So let's start drawing polyline. And you can see that when I selected a polyline, in my command bar, I have a couple of options appearing here. It's asking me to either specify the next point, or I can specify arc, close, half width, length, undo, and width. So let's try to choose arc, for example. And this means that the next segment of my polyline that I'm going to draw is going to be an arc. To go back to the straight line, I can simply right-click and just go to line. So any tool that you're using, if you right-click with your mouse, this is going to give you the most used tools, the most commonly used tools, as move, copy, mirror, delete, and etc., etc. So you can either select those options on the bottom part of your screen in your command bar, or you can right-click and choose those options in the drop-down menu. There is an option for close, for example. If you click on that, this will close your polyline. It will make a continuous loop. So we will be talking more about open objects and closed objects. So it's very important to understand that, for example, if you're trying to add the texture to something, you need to have a closed boundary. You need to have a closed object. So it's important to understand how to close those objects. So again, if I draw something with my polyline, I can either type C, or I can choose close option in here, or I can right-click and choose close. And you can see that it creates the final segment of my polyline that will connect the beginning of polyline and the end of it, and will create a closed loop. We have a couple of more tools in here in Draw. So we have Circle, for example, and it's also a drop-down menu for different options. How would you like to draw a circle? So would you like to specify a diameter of a circle, or a radius, or a center point? We're going to be just using center radius, and just click anywhere on the screen, and you can either type your radius, or you can estimate by clicking anywhere on your screen. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to play with those extra tools. So you also have, for example, a rectangle in here. So you just start from one corner of your rectangle and go into another one. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to play with those tools. To draw something a little bit more specific, to specific measurements, there is a trick to do it. So let's try to draw a rectangle with specific lengths and widths. So we're going to go to rectangle command, or you can just type rectangle. And it's asking you to specify the first corner. So we're just going to click anywhere on the screen. And you can see that the first option that we have is this little rectangle on the top part of my box with, again, with the measurements that we can type. You can see if I make the rectangle longer, those numbers are increasing. So I'm going to just type the number. So for example, let's call 10 meters long. But instead of pressing enter, because if I press enter, that means that I finish this command, I want to now specify the width of this rectangle. So we specified, for example, the length. Now I want to specify the width. To do that, I will need to jump from rectangle on the top to the rectangle on the right. So I want to jump from here to here. So I specified this length, and I want to now specify this part. To do that, you need to click a tab on your keyboard. So after you specified the first number, click a tab on your keyboard, And you can see that the length of my rectangle is now fixed to 10 meters, 10,000 mil. And I just need to specify the length of it. I'm just going to type again the measurement and press enter to finish it up. So the tab key on your keyboard is going to help you to change from one measurement to another. If you want to check to make sure if everything has been done correctly, on your ribbon on the right there is a measure tool which looks like a yellow ruler. Really, really useful tool because you can just hover, just move your cursor over the object and gives you the measurements for this object. It's not going to keep it in there, but just give you a little preview of what the measurements are for this object. Again, this is a yellow ruler on your ribbon on the right top corner called measure. With the tab key, you can also do very specific measurements and angles for your lines and polylines. So let's quickly go back to line. And we click anywhere on the screen. And we're going to specify the measurement. So again, let's call 10,000, so 10 meters long. Instead of pressing enter to finish the line, I'm going to click tab. And now it's going to ask me to specify the angle. So for example, I want this curve to be at 38 degrees. If you click tab again, it's going to back to the measurements. So you can switch between those measurements, between the length and the angle that you want to specify. And after that, just press enter, escape, or space to finish your curve. And it's going to be at that specific length and at that angle that you specify. Give it a go. I'm going to give you a minute. It's a little bit tricky. You obviously, if you have questions, obviously let me know and I'll come and help. Okay, we're going to cover quickly a couple more commands. So where you have your draw tab, if you maximize it, there are also a couple of extra commands that we're going to quickly try. So for example, we have spline fit, the first tool in here. And this will allow you to create a curve that goes exactly through the control points you specify. So I can click anywhere on the screen, and the curve that I'm creating, the spline, is going to be going through those points in space where I've clicked. I'm going to jump ahead straight to the third and fourth tool, one called construction line and another one called ray. So construction line, which is the third one in the first row, this is going to give you an infinite line, we call construction line, to help you create your grid. This is very useful when you're doing your technical drawings. So if I zoom out, you can see that this curve, this construction line, doesn't have any beginning or end. And you can click Shift to make sure it's perfectly straight, perfectly vertical, or perfectly horizontal. And you can make them as many as you want. And they're going to be infinite curves. Ray, on the other hand, which is a force tool, is a construction line that has a beginning but doesn't have an end. So you just tell it where to start, and it will go in the direction that you want it to be. So it's, again, it's a vector that has a beginning and doesn't have an end, so it's an infinite curve. And construction line, in comparison, is a line that's going to go both ways, up and down. The final thing that we're going to be using in a draw section is going to be our hatches. Hatches are very important to make your drawing pop and give it a little bit of a depth. So by this point, you should have something on your screen, some forms of lines, circles, rectangles overlapping each other. This will be a great example for us to use hatches on. So if you click on the arrow next to hatches, you can see there are different examples. They have hatches, gradient, and boundary. We're going to be using hatches specifically. When we clicked on hatches, we can see that our ribbon has changed to specifically be able to modify the hatches. If you're going to start hover over your drawing, you can see that any closed object, any closed boundaries, we're going to be able to fill up with hatches. Yours might look slightly different to mine. So for me, for example, I have a solid hatch selected, so just a solid color. You might have a pattern selected. You can always change it. You can download more from online if you want to. But AutoCAD itself usually gives you a really good library of hatches. You can look through them, and you can choose whichever hatch you want. If it doesn't change, if it still looks the same, if it still looks like one solid color, try to zoom in, and you will be able to see there are different patterns for those hatches. If it's still coming out solid color, solid white, click on your hatches, and the thing that we need to do, we need to change the scale of those hatches. So our drawing is just too big for those patterns. So click on the hatch, make sure that your ribbon looks exactly the same as mine, and on the middle you have scale in properties in here. Right now it says 1. Try to increase this number. a good thing to know as well, let's continue, that if you click on hatch and start painting inside of your objects, you can see that if you're now trying to select it, it's all seeing it as one object, even though they're not connected between each other. There is an option to separate them if you want to. So if you click and select your hatch to make it blue, again, your ribbon is now going to change the way it looks like. You have options in here on the top part of your screen, and there is a button for separate hatches. That just means that all separate objects that have been hatched are now can be modified separately and not linked to each other. So again, it depends what you're trying to do. If you have different parts of the same wall that you're trying to hatch, you might want to keep those hatches linked, so the scale of a brickwork, for example, is the same. But if you do have something like what we have in here, and you want them as separately, so for example, I want this part to be one hatch, this one to be, for example, in different color, and this third one being in different size, I definitely would want to select them, options, and separate them. And this way, I can now choose that I want this hatch to be at this scale. I want this one to have, for example, a different angle. And this one, for example, I want to increase the transparency of the hatch. So every single one of them, you're able to modify. There is also a really good tool as well with hatches. So again, if you select one, if you click, keep this button on, associative, it means that if I have a hatch selected and if I modify the shape, the hatch is going to update with it. So this is really handy as well. But it's quite easy to break this link. So for example, if you start trimming this original shape or modifying it too much or overlapping it with other shapes, it's going to break that link. So just to keep it in mind. Also try to get used to using different hatch transparencies. So when you start working with your technical drawings, for example, your floor plan, you might want to start including different depths to your drawing. So for example, the hatch for your walls might be a little bit more contrasty, a little bit more bright than, for example, a hatch that's going to represent the furniture and floor finishes. So you know when you see on social media, you have like this beautiful floor plan drawn or a section, and you have those different level, different depths, different colors, or different transparency for the hatch. That's exactly where you do that. So you put, for example, furniture to make it a little bit brighter than the floor finish, and straight away it's going to stand out. It's going to give the depth for the drawing. So that's your hatch transparency in here. You can change it, you can increase it, or you can minimize it. Another thing that we're going to quickly change is I'm going to show you how to annotate your drawing before we move into the actual big project. So in annotation menu, just in here, you have text with little arrow pointing down and two options here. Multiple text, multi-line text and single line. And it literally says, does what it says. Single line is going to put text in the same line, and if you're trying to make it as a paragraph into two lines, it's going to have it as separate objects. If you want to write the actual paragraph, choose a multi-line text. So try to choose a single line, and what you want to do, you want to specify a start point, and you want to specify how big do you want your text to be. So for example, 50. Start typing, and this text is now going to be to the same height that you've specified, and specifically 50 millimeters. So again, text, single line, start point, the height of the text, and the rotation just keep to 0, and just start typing. So this is single line text, and comparison your multi-line text, you will need to specify the boundary box, the text box. And you can start typing. And because we already have properties attached to the left side of our screen, if I click and select the text that I have typed, you can see that there are settings specifically for this text, including the text height. I can just change it in here, and it's going to modify the size of the text. Okay, I'm going to give you 1 minute, and we will start moving into the new file. Okay, what we're going to do, we're actually going to try to create a new project. So the first thing that I want you to do, I want everyone to go to ADD page again. This time we're going to go to useful resources. And in there, scroll all the way down, and you're going to be able to download the folder called ADD Workshop AutoCAD. Just download this folder for me, please. When you download the folder, please locate it on your PC, and it's going to be a zipped folder as well. So you need to make sure that you extract all the files from it before you're going to be able to access them. So find the folder, right-click on it, and just click on Extract All. So you need to unzip that folder. So inside there are going to be a couple of files that we're going to be using. So how do we usually start our project? We don't start completely from scratch. You usually have some form of the map, or you might have a site plan or a floor plan that's already been drawn and provided for you. You will need to be able to bring it into AutoCAD and either trace over it or start working with it if it's vectorized file. So if you're lucky and the files that you have been provided with is vectorized PDF, you might be able to bring this PDF in, and it's going to recognize every single line as a vector, and you're going to be able to continue working on it. Most of the time, all the files that we are given or we find, they're usually raster-based. So they're pixel-based, they're images. So when you zoom in, you can start to see that they're getting pixelated, they're low quality, etc. You will need to trace over them. Okay? So you need to know how to do this. So to bring an image or PDF in, you can just go to Insert. So before we were on the Home tabs, now we go to Insert, and we're just going to go to Attach. Locate the files that you've just downloaded, the folder, and as long as you've extracted all the files, you're going to be able to see it in AutoCAD. And we're specifically looking at the ground floor plan. So we're going to be looking at this building. So falling water, usually you have tons of information about it. It's obviously very famous, and you have the beauty of it that you have all the technical drawings in easy access online that you can find. I'm already providing some floor plans for you, and we're just going to be trying to recreate those floor plans in AutoCAD. So again, we're looking specifically at the ground floor plan. Just click Open, and this new window pops up. Things that you want to change in this window is where do you want to insert this file. I personally prefer to, instead of specify on screen, to untick this option and just keep X, Y, and Z as 0. So it's going to bring the bottom left corner of the image that I'm pasting in the beginning of coordinates, so it will be easier to find. And instead of a specify on the screen, just untick this and just keep this as 1. So your screen, this window, should look the same as what I have right now. Press OK. And it looks like nothing has happened, but if you actually zoom in to your beginning of the coordinates, and to do that, just click on the word top in here on your view cube, and it's going to zoom into the objects that you've just pasted. You're just really, really small. And we have images that have been loaded in AutoCAD in the beginning of the coordinates. Does anyone would like me to go through this again? Do you want me to repeat those steps? So we're going to go into Insert tab. We're going to go Attach. Choose the ground floor plan. Click Open, and just set up those settings exactly what I have on the screen. I'm just going to keep it there for a minute. tools that you're probably going to be using mostly in practice. It's called XREFs, or external reference files. So the idea behind those is that you can bring PDFs, images, other DWG files, like other AutoCAD files, into the files that you're working with, and you can overlay them with each other and use them as references. So for example, you can be working on the ground floor, and at the same time you can bring the basement floor plan underneath, and to make sure that everything is lined up nicely and easily. The good thing as well about XREFs is it works as links, so it doesn't actually paste in the file into a document into your file, which means it doesn't make your file really heavy. So to bring that window, the tool is, we're going to type XREF, so external reference files. So XREF, and it's going to come up with this new window. And in this window, we're going to be able to see all the links, all the files that we're bringing in and overlapping with each other. So in here on the top, you can choose which file you're going to bring in. So I'm going to attach image. And those images are going to be representing first floor, second floor, third floor, basement, etc. So again, to bring that window into our AutoCAD, we type XREF. And in here, we select Attach Image. And try to choose the first floor plan, which is in here. Click Open, and make sure that the settings are matching with this, the same way. All the settings are the same as with your when you are trying to bring your ground floor plan. Press OK. And you can see that your image has now changed. So it's now overlaid the ground floor with the first floor. And because we haven't changed those insert settings, they're now located exactly in the same place. Because they're now overlapped, it's going to be a little bit difficult to work with them, because right now I want to go back to my ground floor, but I can't see it because it's physically under the first floor plan. To separate them, the easiest way to do this is start working with layers. So we're going to go to the Home tab again. And we're going to bring something that's called Layer Properties. My one is now attached on the left, but you can make it floaty if you want to, or you can attach it to a different part of the screen if you want to. I'm going to make it slightly bigger so you can see how it looks like. So the idea is that you're going to have as many layers as you want, and each layer is going to represent something. So for example, you might have a layer that's going to be saying this is going to be the first floor plan, second floor plan, third floor plan, or you might have a layer that's going to be having all the objects that represent walls, or different layers going to be representing vegetation, etc., etc. So what we want to do, we want to create a new layer. And to do that, on the top, you have 3 layers with a little star next to them. Just click on that, and it's going to help you create a new layer. And I'm going to rename it as a first floor. I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to call it a ground floor. And what this means is that right now in my file I have 3 different layers. I have a layer that's called 0, first floor, and a ground floor. I can start moving my objects between those layers. This is really useful. So for example, imagine that you have all the trees and all the vegetation on one layer, and you want to change, for example, the color of the trees that you have on the floor plan. Instead of going and manually selecting each tree or each bush at the same, manually one by one, you can change the color of the layers those trees and vegetation is located on. So if I make this even bigger, you can see there is an option for color. Right now it says white. If I change this color, it means that every object that's on that layer is going to now inherit that color. The same thing about line type. So for example, if you want to change a continuous line to dashed line, every single object that's going to be on that layer is going to change from one line type to a different. You can also hide the layer. There is a light bulb that you can turn on and off. This will be able to just hide every single object on that layer. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly go to the edge of my image, or the first floor plan, click on it, and as long as I have this blue frame around it, that means it's selected. And in my properties, I now have description about this object that I have selected. It says that it's a raster image, the color of it, line type, plot style, but also specify what layer this is. So right now it's on layer 0, and if I click on this, I can choose which layer do I want to move this object to. So for example, I want to move it to the first floor. And now in your properties, when this object is selected, it says that this object is currently on the first floor. Which means that in my layer properties manager, I can just click on the light bulb in here, and I can just turn this layer off. The same thing with the ground floor. I'm going to select the image, and my properties, I'm going to change the layer to the ground floor. And I can now turn it on and off. I'm going to turn off my XREF window. I personally don't like too many windows floating around my drawing space. I have the first floor turned off layer, and the ground floor, the light bulb is yellow, which means it's visible, I can see it. It's also a good practice to lock some layers. So for example, if this image is now on a separate layer, I can click on this lock symbol, I can lock it, which means I can't select it, I can't accidentally move it, I can't accidentally distort it. So because this is your reference image, it's good to have it locked. Again, this can be done in your layers. So again, this is exactly how layers work. So you can make something invisible, you can lock it, you can change the color of those objects. There is also a handy tool in here which is called freeze. So it's going to look like it's doing the same things as turning layer on and off, but to freeze an object or freeze the layer, it actually means that it's going to disappear from your viewport, but it's also going to be disappearing from AutoCAD's memory, from the cache. So it means that your file is lighter, which means it's easier to work with. So for example, if you have a really large map or a really heavy floor plan, you might want to you might want to freeze a layer. So those elements are invisible on the floor plan, but also they don't take the space and the memory of your AutoCAD, which means it's easier to navigate it. Again, to freeze a layer means to make the file lighter and going to be easier to work with. Okay, before we start tracing anything over, we need to make sure that we actually work in 1:1 scale. So right now we paste those images in, but we don't know what scale this is. We don't know how big or how small those objects are. So before you start tracing anything and you start typing some specific measurements, you want to make sure that you're working into 1-to-1 scale. So can you please make sure that all layers are on and everything is unlocked? And what we're going to do, we're going to zoom into our scale bar on the bottom right corner of our drawing. This is the easiest way to scale something by using a scale bar that's already provided on your drawing. You can use, for example, something like a fixed measurement. So for example, a door that usually is a standard width size. So for example, like 80 or 90. So if you know a single measurement on your drawing, you're going to be able to scale the whole drawing based on this measurement. We're going to be using the scale bar in here. So I'm going to turn off the layer properties for now to make the drawing areas larger. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom into the scale bar, and we can see that we have a metric scale bar on the bottom. So to scale something up, I can just, again, don't repeat this, just have a look for now. So I can select an object, I can type scale. It's asking me to specify a base point, and base point just means that this point of space is not going to be moving, it's going to be fixed on my canvas. And you can see that I can manually start scaling an object. It's asking me for a scale factor right now. So the scale factor is something that it's a number. That, for example, if you're working in, if you bring the floor plans, that's, for example, 1:500 or 1:100, and we need to bring it back to 1-to-1 scale, the scale factor is going to be the number that we're going to find out from that scale that we are given. So 1:500 map, it means that it's 500 times smaller than the map which is in real size. So what we want to do, we want to take the map that's 1:500 and make it 500 times bigger. So the scale factor is going to be 500. So if something's small, the scale factor is going to be bigger. You need to increase that by a specific amount of times. So if your floor plan is 1:100, you need to make it 100 times bigger. If you're already working with a floor plan that's 1:1, and you need to scale it down to specific scale, what you need to do is just take in 1 dividing by whatever scale you want to do. So 1 divided by 500. The numbers that you're going to get, that's your scale factor, that's what you type in. So if it's 1:1000 you need to achieve, you need to divide 1 by 1000. The numbers that you're going to achieve is your scale factor. That's what you type in. You also can scale by reference, and that's what we're going to be doing right now. And the reference is this metric scale bar. So I'm going to use the line tool. And I'm going to draw a horizontal line. Click and hold Shift. Draw a horizontal line that goes from 0 to T. So you want to go start line from here to here. Make sure that it's nice and straight. Click and hold Shift. This is going to be our reference. Line, just a line, yeah. So just zoom into your metric scale bar, choose the line tool, click and hold Shift to make sure that line nice and straight, and go from 0 to T. And just press Enter to finish your line. This is going to be your reference. So what we're going to do, we're going to select both floor plans at the same time, or how many do you have, and we're going to scale them at the same time to make sure that they're corresponding to each other, they're exactly the same size. So I'm going to select everything at the same time. So I'm going to click above my drawing, drag the selection tool, select everything. You can see that I have an image selected, and also the line itself selected. And I'm going to type scale. Have a look what I'm going to be doing before you actually start doing it. So I'm going to show it to you first, so please have a look what we have on the screen, and after we're going to go through this again. So select everything, type scale, your base point. I'm going to click on the beginning of a curve, and you can see that it's now trying to scale my drawing, but I don't know exactly how much to scale it by. So what I want to do is I want to select everything, type scale, and you're going to be scaling by reference. So if you can see on the bottom where your command line is, you have the word reference. So instead of typing a scale factor, I'm going to click on the word reference. I'm going to start typing 2000. So the idea is that I'm selecting the beginning of my curve that I've just drawn and the end of that curve, and I'm saying this curve needs to be exactly 2 meters long, because that's how big is a scale bar. So that curve that we've just drawn is going to need to equal 2 meters long. I'm going to quickly undo it and we'll do it again. So we're going to select everything. We're going to type scale. Specify a base point. Could be any point on a map, or if you can do it the bottom left corner as I did. But this time, instead of typing a scale factor, we're going to choose reference. I'm going to zoom into this curve that we have drawn. And we're going to go from the beginning to the curve to the end of the curve. And the new length of this curve needs to be 2 meters, 2000 mil. I'm going to quickly do it again. So select everything. Control A is a shortcut to select everything that you have on the screen. So Control A, type scale, and just keep reading what it says in the command bar. Specify the base point. Base point is a point that's not going to move when we scale it. It's a point that we scale it from. So bottom left corner. And now it's asking us to specify a scale factor or choose a reference point. I'm going to choose reference. And now you need to go to the curve that we have drawn, because this is our reference line. I'm saying this curve from this point to this point. So click once here, second time at the end of your curve. So the distance between this point and this point needs to be 2 meters long, because we can see that on our scale bar it says 2 meters. So from point A, which is in here, to point B in here, the new length for this segment needs to be 2000 mil. To zoom out and you'll be able to see the map, just click on the word top, and it's going to bring the whole map to the middle of the screen. To make sure that everything you've done correctly, just go on the Home tab, Measure tool, and hover over the lines that you have drawn. It should say 2000 mil above it. Okay, so now we scaled our drawing. Now we know that it's 1 to 1. We can now turn off our first floor layer because we right now don't work with it. We know that we scale it together with the ground floor. We know that's also 1 to 1. It's exactly matching with our ground floor. And we're going to turn it off for now. And we're going to lock our ground floor because we don't want to accidentally move it. So again, your first floor needs to be invisible and your ground floor needs to be locked. Okay, so now we have a ground floor locked. We have a first floor invisible because we're not going to be working with it right now. And you can see that I can't even select this floor plan right now. I'm not going to be able to accidentally move it. So the next thing that we're going to do, we're going to start tracing this over. So I want to create a new layer for everything that I'm going to be drawing. So in layer properties, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call it walls. If you double click next to the little page, next to the word wall that we just created, it's going to appear as a green tick. That means that this layer is current. That means that I'm currently on that layer, and everything that I draw is going to appear on that layer. I want to straight away change the color of this layer. So let's change from white to something that's a little bit more contrasty, something that I'm going to be able to see on the page. So let's try, for example, bright blue. I also want to change the line weight straight away, just to show you where things are located. So line weight, double click, and you have all those different options. Okay, so now if I choose a polyline tool, I'm choosing polyline instead of a line because I don't want to go through the whole floor plan, trace it over, and find out that every single object that I've drawn is a separate line, and I need to go back, select everything, and join it. So I'm going to use a polyline straight away, so everything is connected to each other. I'm going to quickly show you before we start tracing things over. So straight away, it should be the colors that I have specified it to. If it's not the colors that you have chosen, so for example, I start drawing as a polyline, and I start drawing with red, it just means that in properties, the color has been changed to something else. You can see the color of the object that I'm currently drawing with is red. But instead of that, I want this color to be defined by a layer. So that means that you can have 50 different objects on the same layer. All of them going to be color of those objects are going to be defined by a layer. So for example, for me it was dark blue. But you can still change an individual object color. So you can always change either defined by layer the color of the object, or you can change it manually. It's always preferable to choose define color and line type and line weight by layer, because it means that you can just need to change layer settings once instead of going and manually changing setting for every single object. So by layer, I'm going to select the objects that I've just drawn, and I'm going to change the color of it by layer. And you can see that it's dark blue, which is actually a really horrible color because you can't really see anything. So I'm going to change the layer color. Instead of a blue, I'm going to do it bright red. the line weight, even though I've changed the line weight on my layers, it doesn't look like anything is changing on my viewport. To make sure that I can see those line weights, I need to go to the lowest part of my screen, the bottom part, in customization options here. And you need to make sure that your line weight is ticked. This will bring a new tool on my status bar, which is in here. Just going to leave my cursor in here. As long as the line weight tool is enabled, you can see that you can see the difference in line weights. Your lines are going to be chunkier now. Just a little bit easier to see. So what we're going to do now, we're going to start choosing a polyline. Make sure that your ortho is on, because we're going to be drawing straight lines. We don't want any angled walls. So your ortho is on, and we're going to start tracing over our drawing. Just quickly, there is a really useful tool specifically for drawing floor plans. Obviously, we don't draw floor plans as a single line. Floor plans have the thickness to them. So instead of going over and tracing both sides of this wall, I can use a tool that's called offset, which is going to offset the curve that I've just drawn to the specific distance. So you know how we use the draw tools in here on the ribbon? The next one was modify. There is a tool just in here that's called offset. It looks like two arches. One sits inside another. Or you can just type offset. This tool in here. So we're going to click on that offset tool, and we either can start typing the measurement, how big is the wall that you want to offset. So for example, let's start typing 200. I'm going to select an object that I've just drawn, and you can see that it almost makes a copy of the object that you have just drawn, and it offset it either upwards or downwards, inside or outside, but the measurement that I've typed. So I can now start typing this measurement. So for example, let's try 500. And you can see that instead of drawing the same curve twice, this is now just offset the original curves by specific distance. So again, I can, for example, select the curve first, type offset, or just click it on here on modify tools. Specify the distance. So for example, 450, press enter, and it's going to offset my curves that I've just done. Okay, so I've traced a couple of walls with the different methods of tracing. So just quickly, if everyone could please look at the screen. So I turn off my ground floor so I can't see the drawing behind my, the image behind my drawing. So the only thing that I can see is the walls that I have traced. And I use a different method how did I trace them. So for example, this one consists of two separate objects. So this is a polyline and this is a polyline, but they're two separate objects. Good practice is to join walls like this. So I want to select them and I want to type join. So they're now a single polyline, single closed polyline. If I traced over something and I created something like this, so there is an overlap of lines, you really don't want something like this to happen. To make sure that this is all cleaned up, you're going to be using commands that called trim. So where you found your offset command in modify tools, there is a trim option in here. Looks like little scissors. Really, really useful tool. And if you hover objects that are overlapping, as long as there is an intersection, you can see that you can delete parts of an object that you don't need. So I'm going to select my object first, click trim, and I'm just going to delete elements that I don't need. This wall in here, I have drawn, instead of a polyline, I used 3 rectangles that are overlapping each other, just like that. What you want to do, you want to trim them the same way. If you accidentally deleted or trimmed something a bit too much, something too far, you can also extend the curve. So exactly the same place where you have trim, there is an arrow pointing down, and there is a command for extend, which means that I can hover one of the elements, one of the curves, and it will extend to the closest line next to it. The same thing here. So extend will extend the curve to the nearest object. Trim will trim whatever's intersecting. And the same as before, because it's separate objects now, I want to select everything by clicking all the curves and just type join. Now all those walls have been joined. So what I can do, I can now hatch them. I can click on hatch, choose the hatch that I like. So for example, some kind of angular 45 degree lines. I can hatch it. If I'm not happy with the angle, I can always change it to 45 degrees. I can change the scale of it. If I'm not happy with the hatch, I can change it to something else. And you start to have details appearing on your drawing. I also don't like how, for example, how bright this hatch is, so I can click on it, select it, and I can increase the transparency to, for example, 60%. Let's do it even more. Let's do 90. And straight away, this gives me a little bit more of an interesting effect. So outlines of the walls are nice and chunky, and the hatch itself is a little bit more transparent. Just because I'm aware of time, it is a lot of tools to go through. Let's quickly go through how to export the drawing. So imagine if you already trace over this whole floor plan. I'm going to quickly show you how to export it at specific scale. So to speed up the process, because again, we are going over time, in this folder that you've downloaded, there is a file called file number 10, Falling Water. Please open it, and you can see all the drawings that have already been traced over. So again, the folder that you have downloaded, there is a file called Falling Water. Open that file, and in the model viewport, you have all the drawings already been traced for you. So what you want to do, now they've been all drawn 1:1 scale, you want to export them. So instead of going to the model viewport, we're now going to create a new layout, and we're going to set it up for the print. So model, we have a bunch of layouts already created. We're going to click on the plus button to create a new layout. And the first thing first, we need to specify what the page size we want to save this as or as exported. So for example, if you know that you're going to be printing to A2 or A3, that's where you need to specify it to. So we're now on our layout page. We're going to right click on the layout, and we go to Page Setup Manager. So click on the plus button on the bottom of the screen to create a new layout. Right click and go to Page Setup Manager. Choose a layout that you've just created. For me, it's layout 1. And we're going to click Modify. And in this section, we're going to set up our page. Usually, all the settings here are the same. The only thing that changes is the page size, the physical page size itself. So we're going to change it once, and I will strongly suggest you take a picture of those settings. So first thing first, you need to save which print or plotter you're going to use. So we usually just save as PDF file and print after. So we're going to go to Adobe PDF we want to create. Paper size, I'm going to choose, for example, A3. Keep the scale as it is. Don't touch this, because this is just going to mess up your scale. If you're planning to print your floor plan, make sure that the quality of the print is minimum 300, otherwise it's going to be pixelated. And if you want to print out in black and white, if you don't want to preserve a color of your floor plan, you can choose grayscale. These are the only things that you need to change. So I would strongly suggest you take a picture of that. And press OK. This can be now closed. Now our page has been set up to be A3 page size. And the thing that we want to do, we want to click on the viewport, so it's window into our model view. We want to change the size of it so we can actually see what's happening. And if you double click on inside, you can start zooming in and out to your drawings. And you can see that we have a lot of technical drawings going on here. We have some section, we have elevation. Obviously, we're not going to be able, or we won't want to print all of them at the same time. Pick a drawing that you want to print or save. So for me, it's going to be this one. You can start typing zoom. So just start typing letter Z. Zoom. Click on the drawings that you want to zoom into, and it's going to bring you to that drawing. Obviously, when I'm moving the wheel of my mouse, it's going to be constantly zooming in and out, so it's not going to give me a specific scale that I want to. To make sure that this drawing is to specific scale, while you still have viewport selected, on the bottom part of your screen, there are scale options in here. So I can choose, for example, 1:100, or I can choose 1 to 50 if I need to zoom into a specific room. If you need to create a custom scale, you also can do this here. You just scroll down to the custom options and you say, okay, 1 to 100 is still too small. I need to change it to a different scale, but the scale is not listed here. So I'm going to add my own one. So add, I'm going to say 1 to 500. And I'm going to set the scale up. I'm just going to say that a paper unit, one paper unit, equals 500 drawing units. If it's 1 to 1000, I'm going to say that one paper unit equals 1000 drawing units. Press OK. And now this 1 to 500 scale is appeared. Press OK. And now just choose this 1 to 500. Again, it could be 1 to 250, 1 to 1000, etc., depending on what you're trying to achieve. I'm going to do 1 to 100 for now. Press Escape. Come off the viewport by double-clicking a gray space. And the only thing that's left to do is to click on the printer on the top part of our screen. So it's to plot. And you can see it comes up with the same windows that we already set up. But because we already set up our page, we just click on plot and we can just click OK. Of course. So annoyingly, my Adobe Acrobat is now doesn't work because I need to reapply my license. But the idea is that you just press OK and it gives you a nice PDF at A3 page with the floor plans that you can see. So that's pretty much it. So we've covered drawing tools, we started looking into modify tools, we heavily looked into layers, how to bring the drawings in and images in, how to reference them externally, how to start tracing, how to start hatching, and how to export the drawing. So again, obviously it's a lot of tools, it's a really big software. So again, you're kind of expected to keep practicing it on your own time. But the main tools we covered. If there are any questions or you start practicing it with it and you're still struggling with specific things, you obviously can always come to see one of us in ADD team by booking one of the tutorials. So I'm just going to quickly show you where to do that. So when you go to ADD Moodle page, if you have any questions, again, it doesn't necessarily it's about AutoCAD, could be any other software, or it could be about sketching or your analog skills, anything else you need help with, go to ADD page, go to weekly tutorials, and just book an ADD tutorial. And you will be able to see open slots with one of us from ADD team, and you're going to have half an hour one-to-one help. You can do it any week, like at any point. Just go to ADD page and book a tutorial with one of us. We're going to be able to help you. Okay? Again, it's a lot to cover. Keep practicing it. But if anyone gets lost or have any questions, obviously book a tutorial and come see us. Okay? I know we're half an hour over, so I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you so much for coming and joining us.